Welcome to our Homegrown Parent Deep Dives, where we explore the fears, habits, and beliefs that shape how we show up, not just as parents, but as people. We know parenting isn't easy, and sometimes it feels like the struggles outweigh the wins. That's why we're here, to help you uncover the patterns holding you back, embrace a growth mindset, celebrate your progress, and grow into the parent and person you've always wanted to be. If this resonates with you, hit subscribe, check out the links below, and visit homegrowparent.com for more tools and support. Let's take this journey together, one deep dive at a time.
All right, so let's dive into something I think a lot of parents struggle with, right? It's that wild ride of raising a teenager. You know, one minute they think you're the best thing since sliced bread, and the next, it's like you're speaking a foreign language. So if you're here hoping to crack the code and build a stronger bond with your teen, you're in the right place. We're going to go deep on some research that breaks down why it feels like you're on different planets, and most importantly, it gives us some real strategies to bridge that gap. I mean, think about it. Remember when they were little and thought you hung the moon? What happened? And where do we go from here?
It's wild, right? Like that shift. It feels like it happens overnight, but it actually makes a lot of sense when you understand like what's going on in those teenage brains, because we're not dealing with tiny adults here, you know?
Okay, so what's actually happening in their heads?
Okay, so picture this, right? The prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for like decision making, impulse control, that kind of stuff, it's still a work in progress. It's like a city undergoing a massive renovation, you know, jackhammers and detours everywhere. And meanwhile, the limbic system, which is driving all those intense emotions and that need for social connection, is in overdrive. It's a lot.
So it's not just them being dramatic, like there's a biological reason for all the intention.
Like it's literally how their brains are wired. Then you throw in the pressure cooker of high school and the fact that biologically their brains are pushing them to separate from their parents. It's kind of a recipe for, well, chaos.
Okay, so that push and pull that we're all familiar with, that whole I need you but go away thing, that's not just them being difficult.
Right. It's a total paradox. They crave connection and guidance and all that, but their brains are screaming at them to go it alone. It's like they're trying to launch a spaceship, but they still kind of need us to hold the ladder steady, you know?
Makes sense.
Yeah.
But how do we as parents handle that? Our instinct is to like jump in, fix it, give advice, do what parents do.
And that's where we often trip up. The research is really pointing towards something called reflective listening. It's way more effective. It's not about, you know, swooping in with all the solutions. It's about really hearing them, acknowledging those feelings, even if we don't get it or agree.
So instead of saying like, well, maybe you should have studied harder when they're upset about a bad grade, what do we do?
Try something like, wow, that must be really frustrating. You put in a lot of effort and it's hard when it doesn't go the way you hoped.
So it's more about validating their experience than like minimizing it.
Exactly. And get this. The research actually showed that teens who felt heard by their parents were more likely to, you know, come to them for help down the road. It's pretty powerful.
So it's not just about that one interaction. It's about like building trust,
Right. Yeah.
showing them that we're a safe space, even when things are hard.
And that leads to another really key point. Meeting them in their world. We don't have to become TikTok stars overnight, but making an effort to understand what they're into, it matters.
So even if I like don't get the appeal of Fortnite, I should at least like ask about it, maybe even watch them play for a bit.
Right. Think about it this way. When someone shows genuine interest in something we're passionate about, that makes us feel seen, you know? Like it shows them we value their world, even if it's different from ours.
Okay, I'm getting the bigger picture. But let's be real, it can feel like a losing battle.
Yeah.
Sometimes they're just so closed off, like they shut down any attempt at a conversation.
That's so common. And there's actually a really interesting reason for it. The research shows that one of the biggest fears teens have is being judged, especially by their parents.
Oh, I totally remember that feeling. It's like walking on eggshells, terrified of saying the wrong thing.
And that fear is like this huge roadblock to open communication. So what can we do? Create a space that feels truly non-judgmental.
Easier said than done, right? Especially when they're testing boundaries and making like choices we don't agree with.
It's definitely a challenge, but think about it. Have you ever confided in someone who jumped to conclusions or offered unsolicited advice?
Not only have I done that, but I've been on the receiving end too. And it makes you want to just shut down immediately.
Exactly. So how do we shift that dynamic? Research suggests a super powerful but often overlooked strategy: vulnerability.
Wait, you're saying we should share our own struggles with
Okay.
our teenagers?
Not everything, obviously, but sharing age-appropriate stories, times we messed up or felt insecure, things like that, it can have a huge impact.
It's true, actually. When my daughter was going through a tough time with her friends, I told her about a time in middle school when I felt completely left out, and it really opened up the conversation.
That's perfect. Vulnerability takes the judgment out of the equation and it builds trust. It shows them we're not these, perfect, all-knowing beings. We're human just like them.
This is making so much sense. And speaking of valuable insights, we wanted to take a quick second to say thank you to you, our incredible listeners. If you're finding value in these deep dives, hit that subscribe button so you don't miss an episode. We're here to help you navigate these sometimes stormy seas of parenting.
Okay, so before we got sidetracked, we were talking about shifting from superhero parent to trusted sidekick. And there's one more piece we need to cover before we wrap this section. This one might be the toughest yet.
Oh, good. I was just getting comfortable. Bring on the challenge.
It's letting go. Letting go of control, that is.
Oh, yeah. That's got to be one of the hardest parts of parenting.
It is. But remember, we're talking about a gradual release here, not abandoning ship entirely. It's about trusting them to make their own choices, even if they're not always the choices we'd make.
This is both terrifying and kind of freeing at the same time. Where do we even start?
It starts with understanding that their journey to independence is a natural process and a necessary one. We can't protect them from every mistake or disappointment. In fact, sometimes those are the most valuable learning experiences.
So it's less about preventing them from falling and more about being there to help them up when they do.
Exactly. Think about it like this. We're transitioning from superhero to, trusted sidekick.
Love that analogy. We're still there for support and guidance, but they're taking the lead.
And that brings us to a really important question. What about boundaries? Where do they fit into all of this?
That's a great question.
It's a big one, and it's one we're going to tackle in more detail in the next part of our deep dive, so stay tuned. Welcome back. Before we got to letting go and all the feels that come with that, we were talking about shifting from superhero parent to trusted sidekick.
Which, let's be honest, is way harder than it sounds.
Right. Way harder. And as we navigate this new terrain, boundaries become even more important. But boundaries, they get a bad rap, We think of them as restrictive, but really they're about creating a safe space, a structured environment where, everyone can thrive.
So less about control and more about
Right.
what? How do we frame it?
Think of it like a trellis for a climbing plant. It provides support, guidance. It lets the plant grow strong and healthy. Without it, the plant would just kind of sprawl all over the place.
Right.
Vulnerable. No direction.
Okay, I like that. Good visual. But how do we translate that to teenagers? They're not exactly known for, loving rules and limitations.
You're telling me it's all about shifting the dynamic from I'm the parent, you're the kid, these are the rules, to something more collaborative. Get them involved. Explain the why behind the boundaries.
So instead of just saying no phones at the dinner table, we could explain that it's about connecting as a family, being present with each other, and that devices are a distraction.
Exactly. Help them see the benefits, right? Both for themselves and the family as a whole. And don't be afraid to, negotiate a little. Maybe they have a point about needing their phone for something specific.
It's about that middle ground, right, where everyone feels heard and respected, even if they don't get everything they want.
And consistency is key. Teenagers, they thrive on routine and predictability. When boundaries are clear, consistently enforced, it creates stability, security.
It shows them that we mean what we say, too, right? That we're not just, making stuff up as we go.
Exactly. And this is where things can get a little, tricky because teenagers, they're masters at testing limits. It's in their DNA, push back, see what they can get away with.
Oh, I've lost count of how many eye rolls and heavy sighs I've gotten in the past week alone. How do we, stay strong when they turn on the charm or the teenage angst?
It's not easy, but it's so important to stand your ground. Boundaries aren't about winning some kind of power struggle. They're about teaching life skills, responsibility, self-discipline, respect for themselves and others.
So it's not personal,
Yeah.
even though it often feels that way. We're not doing this to make their lives miserable.
Right. We're setting them up for success now and in the future. And honestly, sometimes those boundaries are as much for us as they are for them.
You mean setting screen time limits so I don't have to compete with their phone for their attention?
Yeah.
Guilty.
We've all been there. And speaking of helpful resources, we wanted to remind you about all the cool stuff in our show notes, practical tips, inspiring stories. If you're looking for that kind of support, definitely check out our parenting newsletter. It's got advice from experts and real parents who have, been there, done that.
And for those of you who are ready to go all in on this whole parenting thing, we highly recommend our Growth Mindset Parenting Journal.
It's a great tool for self-reflection, for growth. It'll help you, cultivate a more positive approach to parenting.
But let's get back to boundaries for a sec. Even with the best intentions, even when we're trying to be collaborative, those conversations, sometimes they get messy.
Oh, yeah. It can get heated. And that brings us to another key piece of this puzzle, communication. We take it for granted, right? But with teenagers, it can feel like we're speaking different languages.
It's like they have their own secret code. And we're left trying to, decipher it. Any tips for cracking that code?
First step is to change our focus. Stop trying to extract information and start trying to create a space where they feel safe sharing. Think about it. When are teenagers most likely to open up?
Definitely not when I'm grilling them about their day or like interrogating them about who they're texting.
Right. Sometimes the most meaningful conversations happen during those casual everyday moments.
Like driving in the car,
Yeah.
walking the dog, or even just being in the same room, pretending to read a book while secretly hoping they'll start talking.
Exactly. Those moments when their guard is down, when they're not feeling pressured. And when those opportunities pop up, resist the urge to bombard them with questions.
So less interrogation, more invitation.
Exactly. Instead of asking those closed-ended questions that just get you one-word answers, try asking open-ended questions. Questions that invite them to share, their thoughts and feelings.
So instead of asking, did you have fun at the party? I might say, what was the best part of the party?
Perfect. And be genuinely interested in their answer, Put down your phone, make eye contact, really listen to what they have to say.
It's the little things, right, that show them we care, that we value their opinions and experiences, even if they're different from ours. But what about those times when they just, refuse to talk? It's like pulling teeth.
We've all been there. And this is where the power of presence comes in. Sometimes the most powerful form of communication is just, being there without judgment, without expectations.
So even if they don't seem interested in talking, just being present in the same room, doing our own thing, that can be a form of connection.
Absolutely. It creates safety, security. It lets them know you're there, no matter what.
This is all great advice, but I got to be honest, sometimes it feels like I'm trying to communicate with a brick wall.
I hear you. And that's why this next piece is so crucial. Empathy. Empathy is like the secret weapon in our parenting arsenal.
Okay, I'm intrigued. We've talked about listening, understanding. How is empathy different?
Empathy goes beyond just acknowledging their feelings. It's about stepping into their shoes, trying to see the world through their lens, even if we don't agree with their choices.
So it's about understanding the why, not just judging the what.
Exactly. Teenagers, they're going through so much change. Their brains are still developing. They're figuring out who they are, where they fit in the world.
It's like they're navigating a whole new world. And it's bound to be, bumpy.
And when we approach those bumps with empathy, it changes everything. Instead of getting frustrated or defensive, we can try to understand what's driving their behavior.
For example, if my teenager is constantly snapping at me, instead of taking it personally, I could try to see it from their side. Maybe they're feeling overwhelmed. Maybe they're exhausted from trying to juggle, school, friends, activities.
And when we can connect with those underlying needs, it opens up a whole new level of communication. We can say things like, hey, I've noticed you've been a little on edge lately. Is there anything you want to talk about? Or, it seems like you have a lot going on. How can I help?
It's about shifting, right? From judgment to understanding.
And that shift, it can be huge for both of you.
This is making so much sense. But, sometimes it feels like I'm failing at this whole parenting thing.
Oh, you are so not alone. Parenting teenagers, it's one of the toughest jobs out there, but also one of the most rewarding. But it's okay to not have all the answers. In fact, that's part of what makes us human.
This has been so helpful. We've covered so much. The teenage brain, empathy, the power of those everyday moments.
And we're not done yet. In the final part of our deep dive, we're going to explore some strategies, how to put all of this into action. So stay with us.
All right, welcome back to the deep dive. We've been tackling this whole connecting with your teen thing, and honestly, it feels like learning a whole new language.
It really is. We've decoded the teenage brain. We talked about boundaries, empathy, the importance of those little everyday moments, but
But how do we actually put all of this into practice?
yeah,
It's one thing to get the theory, but when you're in the thick of it, those eye rolls and slam doors,
yeah,
it's easy to get thrown off course.
totally. That's why having like a toolbox of strategies can be so helpful. It's like having a first aid kit for those inevitable parenting, like
Yeah.
bumps and bruises.
Okay, I love that. So what's in this first aid kit? What are some actual things we can do, like starting today, to build those connections?
One thing that a lot of people don't think about is creating rituals of connection. These are like small, intentional things that you do regularly. They help build closeness and that sense of belonging. It's like making little deposits in the emotional bank account of your relationship.
Okay, give me some examples. What kind of rituals are we talking about?
It could be simple things like having a tech-free night where you all put the devices away and play a board game or have dinner together, no distractions. Or maybe a Sunday morning pancake tradition, make breakfast together, listen to music.
I love that. It's not about these grand gestures. It's the small, consistent things that build that connection and routine.
Exactly. And the cool thing about rituals is that they can be whatever works for your family. Maybe Friday night is movie night, or you go for a hike in the park every Sunday afternoon.
As long as it's something you all enjoy and look forward to.
Right. Another really powerful thing you can do is focus on their strengths. Celebrate their accomplishments, even the little ones. Teenagers get so many messages about, what they're doing wrong, how they need to be better.
It's like they're constantly being judged, right?
Yeah.
At school, on social media. It's a lot.
It is. So we need to counterbalance that with like real praise and encouragement. Notice the effort they're putting in, acknowledge their progress, celebrate those wins, big or small.
So instead of focusing on, the C they got on their math test, I can mention that they studied hard and improved from last time.
Yes. It's about shifting our focus from their shortcomings to their strengths. And when we do that, it doesn't just boost their self-esteem, it strengthens our connection with them too.
It lets them know that we see them, we value them, we're proud of them.
And sometimes the best way to connect is to let go of that need to be right all the time. Choose your battles. Not everything has to be a debate or a power struggle.
Oh, this is a tough one for me. I have such a hard time biting my tongue, especially when I know I'm right.
I hear you. But honestly, constantly correcting them, lecturing them, trying to control everything, it usually backfires. It creates resentment, distance.
So sometimes it's better to just let things go, even if it means they might mess up along the way.
Sometimes, yes. Think about it. We learn the most from our own experiences, right? The good and the bad.
And isn't that what we want for our kids? To help them become, independent, capable adults.
Exactly. And sometimes the best way to do that is to step back, trust them, let them figure things out. And remember those resources we talked about, the parenting newsletter and the growth mindset journal. Those are full of even more tips and strategies. You can find links to both in the show notes.
This has been so insightful. I feel like I have a whole new set of tools to connect with my team.
And remember, there's no magic formula. What works for one family might not work for another.
The important thing is to find what works for you, what feels right for your family, and just keep showing up right, with love, empathy, and a willingness to learn and grow alongside them.
And even on the toughest days, remember, you're doing a great job. Keep up the amazing work, parents.
That's it for this deep dive into the world of teenagers. We hope you found it helpful, insightful, and maybe even a little bit inspiring. Until next time, happy parenting.
To show our appreciation for you as our listener, we've linked to some free resources to support you on your journey. Check out the links below and subscribe for more deep dives where we'll go deep on the issues that matter most to you. If you have a specific topic you'd like covered, leave a comment below and we'll do our best to help out. So until next time, stay calm, appreciate the moment, and look deep inside where you'll see yourself and your child.